Someone that's new to the UFO abduction research space and is trying to their best to better understand what's going on, what would you suggest to them as a good starting point so they don't go down the wrong rabbit hole?
The reports we received on about 6,000 experiencers were denied for years, but now we see that they're real. Many of them say that they have been here since the beginning of life on our planet. I have seen verified photographs of these things as a researcher. Many of these extraterrestrials are using interdimensional technology, we believe, to open portholes, to go into people's homes. They would come to your home at night. People would see the wall opening up, the ceiling opening up, a hole through the window. It was some kind of portal. People are entitled to do what they want with their lives. And unfortunately, the ETs don't ask for permission. When they go to take children from their homes, they can appear as clowns or firefighters or police officers, whatever it is that's going to make the child feel safe. It could be that they've always been here. Maybe the reptilians. Another possibility is that they're time travelers, that they are us from the future, coming back to try to change things.
There's so many possibilities, and it's kind of mind-bending and mind-blowing to a certain degree as you're trying to find the truth.
It appears that they are attempting to upgrade humans.
Kathleen, thank you so much for joining me this evening. Once again, glad you're feeling much better, and really glad to have you here this evening.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Wonderful. Well, as mentioned before, I do like to start off with a little bit of an introduction just to give people a little bit of a better understanding of who you are. I think your work certainly speaks for itself. You have a number of different books out there. You've done a lot of research over the years, lots for us to dive into. And I'm very excited about this one specifically because I'm very familiar with the Betty and Barney Hill story, but I have never met anyone that's this closely associated. So this is incredibly exciting, to say the least. But Kathleen Marden is an internationally recognized UFO abduction researcher, author, and lecturer with more than 3 decades of experience in investigation, research, and public education. She earned her BA from the University of New Hampshire and completed graduate studies in education at the University of Cincinnati and UNH. A former educator and program supervisor, she later served for 10 years as director of MUFON's Field Investigator Training Program and another 10 years as director of MUFON's Experiencer Research Team. She is a recipient of the International UFO Congress Lifetime Achievement Award and currently serves as a MUFON Lifetime Member, Benefactor, and Research Consultant. Once again, Kathleen, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be with you this evening.
Absolutely. Well, Kathleen, I do want to start here. You have a number of books that you've either written or co-authored, and I do just want to give the crowd a general overview of those books. This is a little bit of a plug as well. Early on with the different books that people can go and read and research on you. Obviously, there's a lot of information online as well, and I'm going to share your website so they're going to be able to dive into all this. But can we just start with the books and kind of the timeline of the books that you have written and or co-authored over the years and what they are about?
Well, my first published book on UFOs was about Betty and Barney Hill, my aunt and uncle. And I had worked on that beginning in 1991 when I joined the Mutual UFO Network and became a field investigator and decided that I was going to spend a tremendous amount of time researching the case, investigating the case, and on and on. I spent a great deal of time with Betty Hill, my aunt, prior to that and during this investigation up until the end of her life. So a tremendous amount of work in that. I had it mostly written when I decided I did not want to do the part on the star map myself, the star map research. And so speaking of that, Betty observed a star map on the craft after she asked where they were from. So this is what I'm talking about. Stanton Friedman was an expert on that. He was a nuclear physicist, had a master's degree in physics, and agreed to work with me. And so we wrote Captured, The Betty and Barney Hill UFO Experience, which was published in 2007. Our next book was called, what was it?
You have Forbidden Knowledge, Contact Extraterrestrial, as well.
Science Was Wrong.
Yep, Science Was Wrong.
Our next book, published, I believe, in 2009, was Science Was Wrong. And this was about the history of mainstream science. And we did a little bit on UFOs at the end of the book. It was actually in the science category in bookstores. And we talked about the history of science and how some very prominent scientists had denied the reality of whatever it was, and how they were debunked, they were ostracized by their peers, and in the end, these people were right, and it was their colleagues who were wrong. So we had a lot of fun writing that book. The next book I had published was with Denise Stoner, who comes from Florida. She used to be Florida's MUFON director, and also when I met her, she was the director of investigations and a state section directors, and that was sort of soon after I moved to Florida, about 16 or more years ago.
Right.
And she confided in me that she was an experiencer, that she had had contact from the time she was a little girl. And so I asked her if I could investigate her case. And she agreed. So I did a very extensive investigation. I was a hypnotherapist at the time as well. So I did hypnosis separately on Denise and her husband, and did a very thorough investigation of her case. So the book, The Alien Abduction Files, begins first with several chapters about my investigation of Denise's case, and Denise's writing as well on what it was like to be an experiencer going through this. So very important several chapters about a significant case. Then I wrote about another significant case that I worked on when I was in New Hampshire for several chapters. I did the hypnosis on that as well. And then the third section of the book is about several different cases of ET contact, UFO abductions, that sort of thing. So that was the third book.
Right.
The fourth book was Fact, Fiction, and Flying Saucers. That was one of my favorites, and actually I have it right here. I've been doing a presentation, developing a presentation based on that book. Stanton and I collaborated with that. Initially, I had begun a relationship with Stanton as me being the mentee, and he was my mentor on the history of government involvement on the investigation of UFOs, their major studies. I knew that there were debunkers, and so I wanted to know all about that too, who they were and what they were saying and what was accurate and what was not and why. And so Stanton gave me many assignments. He didn't just hand me what he had learned.
Right.
I went to the American Philosophical Society. I did a lot of research, archival research for this book. Stanton had already done it. And so that was a book that we wrote together. And it's a very good book, particularly today, since the Congressional Oversight Committee on UAPs is doing a lot of talking about that. And President Trump has released 3 tranches of UFO reports and videos, and so the history is in this book, And so there's a lot more information there.
Kathleen, by the way, I appreciate all of this. I know this is kind of a big question to start the show off with, but I wanted to make sure people understood how much you have done over the years and how involved you've been throughout these books. I will also be, all of these are on their way. They're all on the way to the house right now because I have to review every single one of them. But I also just want people to really fully understand how much you've poured into this over the years, instead of going and watching Disclosure Day and thinking, oh, this is just how this is, right? It's like, no, there's so much academic research behind this.
There is.
People need to know that. They need to know how credible individuals like yourself are and how much you've actually poured your life and soul and heart into what is obviously the UFO and UAP space. So once again, I appreciate you for answering the entire question in its entirety.
A lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of travel to archival collections, just a tremendous amount of work. But it was all worth it because I had the answers about some of these things regarding government documents, etc., years before they've been released, and have written about that. So this book is really about the history and in-depth history. So then the next book I wrote was a book called Extraterrestrial Contact: What to Do When You've Been Abducted. Now, I was the Mutual UFO Network's director of field investigator training first for 10 years, and then for 10 years I was the founder and director of the Experiencer Research Team, which was renamed the Experiencer Resource Team after I left. So we were doing a great deal of research. We were working with experiencers on a daily basis, and this book is a self-help guide, really, for experiencers of extraterrestrial abduction, ET contact, and even people who are having paranormal experiences in their home and wonder how that's related to ET contact. So a great deal of information about ET contact, the abduction experience, overcoming fear, overcoming trauma, the changes that experiencers go through. I have worked on 5 in-depth studies, 4 of them with PhD scientists now. And so some of that is in this book as well. The MUFON study is in this book and addresses other studies and other really great cases. Some of my most interesting cases of ET contact are in that book, both good and bad and in between. So pretty comprehensive book as well. And then the last book that I have written to date is Forbidden Knowledge, a personal journey from alien abduction to spiritual transformation. And I talk about my work, my life, my relationship with Barney Hill, the studies that I have worked on, most of them. After I wrote the book, I've done more studies. And I'm working on another book, actually, but it won't be ready for a couple of years. Okay. It takes a long time for me to write books because of the degree of research that I do. So
I think people also appreciate that nowadays, too, especially with AI. It's like, well, this is not just an AI-generated book. This is something that she's actually doing herself. She's actually writing this book. She's actually doing the research.
I'm not permitted to use AI. If I did, it wouldn't be published. Right. So everything's done by me. In this book, I also talk about experiments that I've participated in, and I talked about some information that came to me from the granddaughter of Admiral Herbert Knowles, who back in 1954 was talking with Wilbert Smith a radio engineer from the Canadian government, and the government's director of Project Magnet and Project Second Story, and their attempts to contact ETs as well. So there are a lot of interesting stories in that book. It's sort of a personal book, not as much in-depth, investigation going to archival collections. But Admiral Knoll's granddaughter gave me his correspondence files with Wilbert Smith, and no one knew about that. And they ended up communicating through telepathic contact via a woman in Maine. And then they were both scientists. And so they were doing a scientific investigation to determine whether this information was accurate or not. Herbert Knowles knew about this woman because she knocked on his door one day and gave him a thick packet of information. And in that packet was information way beyond her level of education and scientific knowledge, allegedly from ETs. And he sent that to Dwight Eisenhower. And Dwight Eisenhower ended up involved in this. I have evidence that it did go to him, that it then went to the Air Force, the FBI, the CIA, and the Navy. So you'll even see an FBI memo of to indicate how the government handled this.
Fantastic.
So a lot of interesting information as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I've got a lot of questions. This is fantastic. I'm going to do a lot of listening tonight, if you don't mind. I've got obviously plenty of questions, and this is me doing a podcast with you, and sometimes I speak a lot just to kind of share my thoughts on things. But if I'm going to be completely honest, I know we don't have, the entire night to do this. And so I want to get to certain questions that I've had that I tend to ask across the board because I'm still learning a lot. Obviously, we're all still learning things as time goes on, and we're going to continue learning things.
And we never know all the answers.
We never know all the answers, right? And I think more than anything,
right.
and I appreciate you saying that right from the beginning, because we just don't have all the information, and I think it takes a huge level of humility to just say that from the very beginning, especially with all of the work that you've done in this space. But with a lot of this is coming out as of late, people are struggling with discernment as to what is true, what's false, how to gather information, how to do the research. Just a basics question before we start and dive into the specifics here, but how would you suggest that somebody that's new to this information, because it's obviously been going on for a while, we've got a lot of information out there, but someone that's new to the UFO, abduction research space and is trying to their best to better understand what's going on, what would you suggest to them as a good starting point so they don't go down the wrong rabbit hole necessarily?
I would suggest that you purchase books by highly qualified individuals. You can go back to Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who was the Project Blue Book's astronomical consultant, and debunked UFOs, and over the years realized they were real, and started the Center for UFO Studies with others, with Jacques Vallée. And so his early work is very, very good. He has left us a long time ago, but his work is very good if you want a foundation of understanding. Also, there are many archival books, but look for a bibliography, look for footnotes, and that's very important because you want to know that the person is presenting valid evidence, valid information. If a book doesn't have footnotes and a bibliography, I'd say it might be an interesting read, but you should probably pass it by if you want real information, valid information. I started with them. Also, Anne Druffel wrote a book about Dr. James McDonald. years ago, he was recognized as the leading scientific researcher of all time regarding UFOs. And I spoke about him quite a bit in Fact, Fiction, and Flying Saucers as well. And the work that he did as a meteorological physicist, an atmospheric physicist, who spent 10 years investigating UFOs scientifically before he published, and he published a tremendous booklet on his work, which I'm not sure if it's available any longer, but you can look for his archives as well. His archives are at the University of Arizona. So he was hated by the debunkers, disliked by Dr. Edward Condon, who did the research, was the director of the Condon Committee. He was really a debunker too. He had a job to do for the Air Force. He had a security clearance, and they did the job. It's all in Fact, Fiction, and Flying Saucers.
Well, being hated by the debunkers probably means you're hovering right over the truth to a certain
Yes, he was.
You're somewhere in the ballpark, the general vicinity, if you're being hated by the debunkers. So
Yes.
that's phenomenal.
I'd recommend my books.
Yep.
I'd recommend books by Stanton T. Friedman.
Okay.
If you want to know about Roswell, he has one. Also, Don Schmidt has a very good book, Don Schmidt and Tom Carey, on the Roswell incident. Very good researchers. If you want to know about the history of ET contact, read John Mack's books, read Bud Hopkins' books, David Jacobs. There's a lot of speculation in David's books, but it's based on his hypnosis sessions. Bud Hopkins took a fairly scientific view of his research and worked with Dr. Don C. Donderi, a professor at McGill University, on some of his work. I've written about that too. I've also worked with Dr. Donderi. He graduated from high school at age 15 and entered the University of Chicago. And just to give you an indication of how bright he is. And he's written books on UFOs too. So Dr. Don C. Donderi, excellent writer. Leslie Kean, Kean, wrote a great book on UFOs as well. You can find that. If you really get into the subject and you start speculating about what it is, Jacques Vallée wrote a good series of books as well. Let me think. I don't want to have anyone angry at me for not mentioning their books. I have.
I'm sure there's plenty. I think more than anything, it's just there's so much information out there nowadays, and with YouTube and with once again AI now, you ask questions and it's going to feed you, lots of information. But I think going back to the baseline and going back to the beginnings of this is really what's most important, to get a really good understanding of what's going on. And I think that's where a lot of our generation is struggling right now, is you're like, there's so many possibilities, and it's kind of mind-bending and mind-blowing to a certain degree as you're trying to parse through the information and find the truth. And once again, there's probably a little bit of truth in everything and a little bit of fiction in everything as well. But we're ultimately working through that together. But I think more than anything, this episode is going to help a lot of people as they are going down this road to realize and open their minds to different possibilities. And realize there's lots of different possibilities, but also that there is a lot of research that's been done into these things to prove that there are other things out there that we kind of understand but don't fully understand yet. And so I'd kind of like to segue into that. I would like to start with the Betty and Barney Hill story and just talk through that, but because that's the first experience that has been ever scientifically researched. That's correct?
That's correct. It was the first case of alien abduction that was investigated by scientists, and most of the scientists who investigated it believed that it was real. Now, Walter Webb was the first investigator. He didn't write a book on it, but you will see some of his report on my website.
Okay.
As well. And you'll read about Walter Webb and his investigation in Captured as well. There were many other scientists who investigated the case over the years. Stanton Friedman investigated the star map that Barney Hill recalled under hypnosis. Dr. Simon, the psychiatrist who hypnotized Betty and Barney separately a couple of years after they had their experience. And what I want to be clear about is this wasn't all recovered through hypnosis. Betty and Barney had clear conscious recall, and it's in the early documents. And you'll find some of those documents on my website. You'll find them in my book as well. So you need to really look at those because those early documents make very clear what Betty and Barney saw, what knowledge they had, and then how they drove up to that close encounter site time after time over the next 2 years after their sighting. They made a report to the Air Force immediately after they arrived home, and the following day as well. So it's all in Captured. Plus you get to know who Betty and Barney were.
Right.
And that's what they did for careers, their families, their awards and honors, and on and on and on into the in-depth, the UFO story, my comparative analysis of Betty's and Barney's statements under hypnosis, because Betty gave me the transcripts and I transcribed everything. I established Betty and Barney's archival collection at the University of New Hampshire, and I am the trustee of their estate. So I have all of the archival records.
Fantastic. And with Betty and Barney Hill, the whole hypnosis thing is discussed across the board. And I know a lot of people retrieve information from hypnosis therapy. Can you, just for those that are not familiar with hypnosis therapy, can you explain why that is important for people to go into hypnosis therapy and why we believe the information that is retrieved from hypnosis therapy as well?
Well, I'm going to qualify that because you have to examine the qualifications of the hypnotist. Is this someone who knows a lot about psychology? Is this someone who is licensed or certified? Is this someone who is experienced in working with experiencers, yet can work with objectivity and without bias? So those are very important things because you never want to lead anyone in hypnosis. Betty and Barney were referred to Dr. Benjamin Simon because Barney had conscious recall of observing non-humans, and they frightened him greatly when he was standing in a field looking through binoculars up at a craft hovering only 100 feet above him. It was always part of his conscious recall, and he was greatly distressed by this. He had what we now might call a light case of post-traumatic stress disorder. He was still able to work, but he had a high level of anxiety around what had happened, what he had observed. And he ended up developing bleeding ulcers because of it, and high blood pressure, and it didn't recede with traditional medical treatment. So he was referred to Dr. Benjamin Simon, who was a renowned neuropsychiatrist in Boston. He was deemed #1 in the country for the work he did. He had been a colonel in the Army, I think it was a lieutenant colonel, and during World War II, and had set up the psychiatric unit at the Mason General Hospital and very successfully treated veterans who were returning from the war with deep trauma. And it showed them perhaps being blind without a physiological cause, being unable to walk without a physiological cause. He used deep trance hypnosis to get to the root of the problem. And at the end of the movie, Let There Be Light, a John Huston movie that was made about his work during World War II, you saw those veterans returning to their homes, getting on a bus, going back to their families, that kind of thing. That's the kind of hypnotist and physician Dr. Simon was. He wasn't your neighborhood hypnotist who treats people for weight loss and smoking cessation and that sort of thing. Highly credentialed.
Wonderful.
And so I did notice that he was attempting in his hypnosis to lead Betty and Barney away from the idea that they had been abducted, despite the fact that both of them, separately, under hypnosis, relived the same, essentially the same type of experience from their own perspectives. Dr. Simon reinstated amnesia at the end of each session, so they couldn't compare notes or share information. That was extraordinarily important as well. And so his hypnosis with Betty and Barney gives you an example of a highly qualified hypnosis practitioner.
Right. That's been on my mind a lot as of late because I keep hearing about hypnosis therapy and regression therapy and how it's helpful in returning to these thoughts and actual experiences. But I think that answers it super well because for some of these stories, they seem a bit absurd. I'm like, I'm not entirely sure that person was qualified to do that hypnosis therapy.
Yeah, I just had one more point to make, and that is that Dr. Simon did not believe that this was even possible, and had never worked with anyone who'd had a similar experience. There are people today who are actually more qualified than he was because they know a great deal about what happens and how to uncover hidden memories, how to break through that amnesia and to get to what actually occurred.
Wonderful. Well, I have a number of fun questions to ask, and we can answer them probably pretty quickly or in a very in-depth manner. But the two kind of additional questions I want to set up for us in preparation for those questions. The first one is about MUFON and about the UFO organizations that have been created over the past 50, 60, 70 years. I have read stories of other governments' involvements, their agencies and organizations getting involved in infiltrating organizations like MUFON and others to try to lead people astray and or add deception to the mix. This obviously occurs at every level. This is nothing new, right?
Right.
But I do want to just address that real quick because I've not really watched anything with anyone addressing that in particular. So I'd like to give us a moment to address that before we then dive into government deception and why the government might be hiding all these secrets in general. But if you wouldn't mind, just because of your experience with MUFON, I would like for us to address it with MUFON in particular and why MUFON is still a very credible organization in and of itself, even with potential infiltration by other organizations and entities, and then lead into the government from there.
Well, the Mutual UFO Network is a well-established organization that was founded after the NICAP, the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, of which Walter Webb, Investigator Walter Webb, who was an astronomer and investigator, was part. And then he went over to the Center for UFO Studies and to MUFON. So MUFON has attracted scientists. It also trains field investigators. It has extensive training so that people don't go into an investigation without knowing what to do. They have the equipment. If people have a landing case, for example. They know how to go to that property, how to stake it out, how to collect scientific samples for investigation, that kind of thing. So that's very good. MUFON writes reports on those investigations. You also get lights in the sky. People always complain about too many lights in the sky, it's too boring, and everyone waits around for those good cases like the landing cases, the close encounters, the abductions, the ET contact cases. But they're few and far between. What has been recommended and what MUFON does occasionally, and this was recommended by the government way back in 1953, is that organizations should also write about cases that they have solved, that they were to show that they were prosaic cases. And many of our cases can be solved through our research and investigation of them. So that makes MUFON a good, reliable organization. They are very well structured and have been a volunteer organization for a very long time. If you want to know more about them, you can go to their website at MUFON, MUFON.com.
Wonderful, wonderful. And as it relates to the government, now the Disclosure Day movie that was just released, and have you seen the Disclosure Day movie already?
I did see it.
Okay. I was a big fan personally because of what it portrayed the government's relationship and the private sector's relationship with UFOs to be and the UAPs to be. I really like the push and pull between the private sector and the reasoning for holding certain information and not wanting to release information, and it also made you think too. This is why they maybe have not shared this information, because it could collapse society as we know it. And I think for me, it definitely made me think even more in depth about the topic, instead of just being like, oh, we want disclosure because it's fun. It's let's think about this from a societal perspective and a societal impact perspective as well. I would first and foremost, what were your thoughts on the movie?
I enjoyed the movie. It was really a chase movie, so pretty exciting. The government organizations were a little over the top. But it made it more exciting, I suppose. The attempted murder of the witnesses who were come forward, that kind of thing. There's been some talk about that in Washington with the Congressional Oversight Committee on UAPs, with individuals who were giving sworn testimony, and you can see that online. So, overall, it was a good movie, but from the experiencers that I've talked to, it was traumatic for some of them. Wonderful for the general public, right, but traumatic for some of them.
And can we dive into that? What about it was so traumatic for those experiencers?
I think that they were reliving what had occurred to them. And if they've gone public, they probably have been harassed and threatened. And so if they have been, you have a dead rabbit with its head severed,
right,
dropped off in front of your front porch, and you're an experiencer. Those memories come back to you.
I, in one of the podcasts that I did, is podcast 36, I believe, with an individual that goes by the name of John. I just recently had him back on with Matt Kellison as well to dive into his experiences. But as a child, he experienced a wolf coming to his window and then pulling him through the window and into a craft. He did not get back a lot of these memories until later on with hypnosis therapy, but he remembers the wolf, but through hypnosis therapy, he saw it as a gray alien pulling him through the window and then into a spacecraft with a another child, a girl, that was a few years older than him at the time, but they both were placed into the craft and then dropped back off later on. He explained that in that episode 36, and so as I was watching the movie, I was like, this is incredible how similar these stories are, and what Steven Spielberg has taken from it, what sounds like other experiencers, and then now portrayed it in the movie in this way. So it really hit me. It honestly made I froze, and I started sweating during the movie because of how similar it was. And so I guess my question to you is, how many of those kinds of experiences have you researched and or heard about from experiencers over the years?
Well, I've talked to, and my team, and I should say, have spoken with several thousand. I have worked on studies with about 6,000 experiencers, and I personally, for the past 35 years or more, have more than that actually, have been talking with experiencers. So into the hundreds or thousands, I don't know. I didn't keep track. Some people like to keep track so they can bragging rights. I never kept track because I keep people's information confidential.
Right. Love it. So with that being said, were those experiences very similar to what I just discussed, or were there a lot that were very different and just kind of a little bit of everything over the years? Or is there a pretty common theme with the experiencers?
There is a pretty common theme regarding the abduction scenario, how it happens. Generally, early on, you were outside. You might have been driving a car, you might have been hiking or camping or fishing, all sorts of things, driving through a remote area when you ended up having a close encounter with a UFO, and then it took you onto the craft. You had missing time. You might have some memories about what happened, but it will be incomplete. When they started taking people from their homes and they're taking people intergenerationally, the scenario was generally that they would come to your home at night, and they would people would see the wall opening up, the ceiling opening up, a hole through the window. It was almost like some kind of portal or doorway where the ETs would come in, either step in or float in very quickly, take control of the experiencer. Initially, the experiencer is terrified, fight or flight response, but then they calm down. They feel a tingling sensation through their body, and then they're very quickly taken back through that portal into a non-human environment, either to a waiting room or to a table where they're examined. There are samples taken from their body. Various tests are being conducted. After that, they generally have education. They might be given information and seen on screens and telepathically about the threat to the Earth from nuclear bombs, from anything nuclear, and also the need to be good stewards to our environment. And more recently, messages to experiencers that we are at risk for a possible extinction because, not by them, but by ourselves, because we have not grown spiritually. That although we have advanced technologically to a very high level, our spiritual development has been stagnant. And when this happens, it can lead to things like nuclear war, to things like the man-made collapse or human-made collapse to the environment that would essentially end civilization for most. I mean, it won't kill everybody or everything, but there will be a mass extinction. if that continues. And so the experiences have pretty much been traumatized by that information over many years, didn't know how to interpret those images, some of them. And we know a lot more about that now.
You mentioned intergenerational too. Have you, from all of your research and studies, found a correlation between the kind of individual and or the kind of family lineage, the kind of person that might be taken and or abducted at the end of the day, or experience these things across the board?
It seems that the experiencers who are taken more than once have psychic abilities, that they can communicate with these non-humans, that they end up being people who, according to our studies, are spiritually oriented, kind. This experience changes them in many ways. They view themselves as being citizens of this planet rather than nationalistic, for example. And so when you have that and the ETs are working with you, they're doing genetic studies, and they want to continue to work with a particular genetic line because it appears that they are attempting to upgrade humans. And they like the proximity of the genetic line so they can compare their tests from generation to generation.
There are a couple of different ways to think about that. And there's a big question about spirituality here, and I'm going to ask you about your spiritual journey through all this. And I'm sure it's obviously, as you explain in your book too, you talked about it, but there's this transformation that occurs as we go through life and we learn new things about ourselves and the world, and information that we just don't fully understand how to comprehend quite yet.
Right.
But do you see that as a good thing? What simple way to ask it? Do you see that as a good thing or a bad thing, or is it somewhere kind of just in between for you at this point?
The spiritual journey?
The aspect of these ETs coming and experimenting on us to upgrade us in our biology. Do we see that as a good thing, a bad thing, or just something that's being experienced?
You know, I think about how we take our pets to the veterinarian, and the pets don't like it at all, but they might be incredibly fearful. They might not understand what's happening, but in the long run, it's saving the pets, extending their lives. Same thing with children. You take your children to the physician, the pediatrician, for their inoculations,
right,
their shots, and it's for their benefit, but they fear the physician. I think of it in that way. I think that most of these non-humans have a benevolent purpose regarding what they're doing to us, even though we don't understand that. And many of us have experienced trauma. A lot of people refuse to let go of that. They claim that there really is an evil agenda and hang on to that fear and hatred, actually, toward the ETs. So that's not the best way to move through life.
Yeah.
That's the way I see it. But people are entitled to do what they want with their lives. And unfortunately, the ETs don't ask for permission. They try to tell people that they asked for permission before they were born, but people don't remember that.
Yeah, right. Lots of soul searching to do throughout our lives.
Yes.
Lots of soul searching to do. With that, for your spiritual journey in particular, can you just kind of give us a little bit of an overview of how that has transitioned over the years and how you've moved through your life and now upgraded spiritually to where you are today?
Yes, absolutely. I started out being highly scientifically oriented. I would not even consider the paranormal as being real, or most UFO reports. I knew that my aunt and uncle had had a real experience. I saw the evidence of that. physical evidence, scientific reports. But over time, I transitioned. I was able to move beyond that left brain mind of mine. And this helped me with my experiments, because I engaged in a number of experiments just looking for answers, as scientifically as possible.
Right.
But still, I had to get over to my right brain in order to do some of that work. And I'm back in pretty much in the left brain again, but I grew spiritually. I enjoyed the right brain activities. Got to meet a lot of those people, and they were very fine individuals, but their boundaries in terms of the scientific were not as rigid as scientists have. And my background was in social science, but I also studied chemistry and physics, that kind of thing.
Wonderful. So this last episode I did, we delved into different creatures also, but greys, reptilians, frog-like creatures, etc. Have those all come up in your research over the years too, or is it more consistent than that?
All of them have come up in my research and investigations.
Okay. That's one to unpack.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to know, because we'll talk about the Nordics as well. We can dive into the Nordics too.
Yes.
But my recent, because I feel like my opinions on a lot of this stuff has changed dramatically. But my recent kind of direction is that there is more of a supreme-ish being of sorts. I still very much so believe in God. I believe in I believe in God very much so. But I believe that from God, there's obviously lots of things that have been created. But the Nordics and the gray aliens, there's a connection there of sorts. And according to my research, once again, please correct me like on the spot if I'm wrong here, but the Greys are acting on behalf of the Nordics and basically following through with jobs for the Nordics. Is that accurate based off of your research?
Yes, that is accurate. And also the insectoid types, the mantis types, are working with the Greys and the Nordics.
Okay.
The Reptilians are an independent group.
Okay. Have a lot of these groups been here for a long time, or are they more so they are coming from different areas of the universe?
That's a good question, and I just don't know the answer. Many of them say that they have been here since the beginning of life on our planet. So that's a very long time, but for many, many years, everyone saw the human types, the Nordic types, right, in craft. They weren't seeing any other type. Then I have reports from the late 1940s where the Greys showed up and were taking people to craft, and the experience was just not as nice as it had been when the Nordics were there alone. I mean, because they didn't absolutely don't look like us,
right, and
there is kind of a weird experience, as I understand
So it sounds
it.
like they then transitioned into or realized if we present ourselves as animals, they'll be better with this, or they'll be more calm. It seems like from the couple of conversations I've had around this topic. Once again, I know you've had thousands over the years. This is the little bit that I know, but it seems like a calming mechanism is to appear as an animal, and it seems like they'll appreciate that more than a gray-looking alien type.
Oh, yes. So you're talking about screen memories. Absolutely. I was thinking that you were talking about the possibility that they created the insectoids and the type that look like frogs.
Yep.
That
as well. That as well.
Yes. But yes, they are well known for giving people screen memories. When they go to take children from their homes, they can appear as clowns or firefighters or police officers, whatever it is that's going to make the child feel safe. The clowns also show up in adult homes. tend to take people. There are other things, giant rabbits, let me think, herd of deer in the middle of the road, but it's actually ETs. So a number of different things. Giant owls is another one.
Wow.
Very prevalent.
There's also this recent conversation between, and people are, as they're doing their research, are trying to better understand, okay, what's the difference between extraterrestrial, ultraterrestrial, and interdimensional? Those are the three big terms that I've heard as of late. It seemed to be kind of the more mainstream conversation. Would you say that it's a little bit of all of the above, or it's possible that it's a little bit of all the above, or is it more so extra or interdimensional than anything?
Well, we know that we don't know for certain, but they claim to come from another solar system, or various solar systems, and I don't know if we can believe them or not. We have a lot more to learn on that. So we would call them extraterrestrials if they come from there. Many of these extraterrestrials are using interdimensional technology, we believe, to open portholes, to go into people's homes. And so on screen, in photographs, you might see an orb coming down through a portal, and it materializes into a full body non-human when it hits the ground. So I have seen verified photographs of these things as a researcher. Another reason to join MUFON and become a researcher, but it takes a long time to get to that. I got to it after about 25 years. So anyway, to ultradimensional or ultra-terrestrial, they've always been here. Maybe the reptilians. It could be that they've always been here, that there was a humanoid reptilian that lived somewhere out of sight and has come up and is taking people. That's a possibility. Another possibility is that they're time travelers, that they are us from the future, coming back to try to change things so they don't end up the way they now are.
I love that one. I love that theory personally. I think that's the most beautiful one. It's you're trying to make your past better so your future can be better as well. I personally resonate with that one a whole lot more. And it seems like a lot of these pop up around nuclear sites, and obviously a lot more ever since we've been there's nuclear activities occurring in the world. So the 40s, 50s, 60s, a lot of this started to really pop out. But obviously, if you look as far back as the hieroglyphics from ancient Egypt, there's plenty of this that appears on the pyramids. So this goes way back, and that's probably another podcast episode altogether. But you mentioned that they shared these things. When you say they shared, how are you? I interpreted that as you maybe had a conversation or a telepathic experience. Can you just expand upon that just a bit more?
Those were through the reports we received in our studies.
Got it.
On about 6,000 experiencers.
Got it.
Some of the experiencers had conversations or received telepathic messages.
Got it.
Stating that information.
Understood. Well, Kathleen, this has been a wonderful episode. I know that I'm sure you've had very lengthy conversations with people over the years, and it's hard to stop this conversation because there are so many questions, so many conversations I want to have. But more than anything, you've got lots of great information out online, wonderful books that delves deep into all of this. It is very clear there's a lot more going on that we don't fully understand and the population needs to know more about. To a certain degree, ignorance is bliss for the population. However, for those that are spiritually available and or willing to learn more, I feel like we should start to learn more as rapidly as possible and just to be open to these possibilities because it's the only way that we grow as human beings. It's the only way we grow as a population. And more than anything, I just really appreciate you sharing your thoughts and your experiences over the years with these individuals that have been so willing to share their experiences with you as well. But is there anything that you'd like to share just in closing tonight that you think might be beneficial for those that are listening in on this episode?
If you are an experiencer, you can contact the Mutual UFO Network. There are also other people that you can find online. I'm no longer working directly with experiencers because I'm focusing on making a 6-part documentary and writing a book, and it's taking up all of my time. But there are other people that I have trained over the years who are now highly experienced, and they would love to speak with you. So that's something. Also, read your books. Read what Donald Trump has released to the public and assess that. Some of them are reports dating back to 1947 or earlier, which were denied for years, but now we see that they're real. Learn how to do an assessment of any video that you see. Can you identify it? What can you identify it as? And there are ways through investigation and research that you can do that. If you become a MUFON field investigator, you'll learn all of that. So, become knowledgeable, have no fear. If they wanted to harm us, they would have a long time ago. And many people think that we're ready to know, that the public has a right to know, that this information should not be withheld from us, as it has been for 60 or 70 or more years.
Well, Kathleen, thank you again for your time, and best of luck with the book and everything you're working on right now. It obviously takes a lot of time, and I know we're all very excited to learn more about everything you're releasing here soon. So thank you again for taking the time tonight.
Okay, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to speak with you.